What we're going to do now is we are actually going to be talking about something called conditionals. So have you ever heard of a condition or conditionals before? So what do you think that is? Yes?
So conditional is something, so like if it depends on something, if something is this, then it depends if this happens or if that happens.
So it's all very depending on different situations. So if this happens, then this will happen. Else, maybe do something else. So what that is, when programmers code something in, it's called a conditional statement. So these are statements that happen only if something activates it. So in this case, I'm the robot. I hit the wall, or I hit the door, then I made a code, a sequence that said, take a step back, turn around, and continue walking forward like I normally did. These are known as conditional statements, things that only happen if something else happens. So that's kind of what you're thinking of. So what's another time that you've used conditional statements in your life? So what I want you to do for about 2 minutes, I want you to turn to someone in your group, and I want you to talk about when you might have used conditionals in your life. When either walking around, doing your homework, think of a time yourself you've used conditionals.
What you would normally do, you would get up and you would go somewhere and sit down. Yeah, exactly.
If you're like going down something as a baby and you fall, you'll probably start crying.
Yeah.
So can someone share with me what they were saying with one of their groups or with their partners? What's something that you shared about a condition? I'm just going to get 2 examples. So
once I accidentally poured juice into my cereal and I tasted it and I realised I poured juice, so I chucked it in the bin and got some more juice and got some actual cereal with milk.
So yeah, maybe if you poured the wrong thing, then throw it away because you didn't want to eat it. So there's a lot of times where if you do something, you have to throw something away, you have to do something else. So we are going to do an example of conditionals with a card game. So a place where you see conditionals a lot is when you're playing games. So if you are playing, name a sports real quick, really, any sport. Oh, we're all gonna pick football, the sport I know none of the rules for. What's a sport? Rugby? Okay, so what's a rule in rugby?
You can't pass backwards.
What happens if you pass backwards?
It's their ball.
It's their ball. So there's a condition. So if you do this, then this will happen. Else it's regular play. So I have a deck of cards right here. I want to play a really, really basic card game. If I get a red card, so I draw a card and it equals red, then my team point is going to be I get 1 point. But if I draw a black card, the other team's point is going to equal 1. So think of it this way now. My points, so we have other team, and then my team, so team point. They both equal 0 right now. So draw a random card. The anticipation is great. So what color is it? So flip it over. Black. So who gets the point? So what color do I have to get a point? Red. The other team gets a point if it's what color? So we just drew black. So who gets the point? Well, guys, we got some confusion. The other team. So the other team, their score was 0 plus 1. So 0 plus 1 is what? 1. So the other team is in the lead. Now let's draw another card. What color is it? Black. So who gets the point? The other team. So the other team's point is the other team's point plus 1. So I have 1 point already. What's 1 plus 1? So the other team gets 2. So I could do this forever. It's just picking a card one by one. But I could make it more complicated. So are there just colored cards in a deck of cards? No, what else is in a deck of cards? A joker, what else? Hearts, we have different suits. We have hearts and spades and diamonds and hearts. What else do we have in cards? Clubs, so we have, what else do we have? Some other things.
Kings and queens.
Kings and queens. So what we could do is we actually could make a different condition for each card, because think of all the card games you've played before. You have to do something or a series of tasks to be able to get something. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to give each group some cards. And what you want to do is we have our one rule of if you draw a red card, then your team gets a point. But if the other team draws a black card, the other team gets a point. I want you to think of other conditions you can give in a card game for your group. And it can be maybe you have to get an ace, a king, a joker, a jack to be able to get a point. Or maybe you double your points if you do something. You can make as many complex rules as you want, but it's your conditions that you're thinking of for this game. You're going to have about 10 minutes to be able to think of a different type of card game or condition statement.
Should we do it so when you pull out an ace, hopefully there's enough? I feel weird writing red and black.
Draw a card.
This is your next instruction. I want in your engineering journals to write down what do you think a conditional is. So if you had to explain a conditional statement to your parents or to a sibling, what would you write down? So for conditional statements, a key learning outcome is, again, being able to really articulate and define what a conditional statement is. That it's something that will happen when another action is triggered. That key moment of being able to say, like, this is the thing that will trigger an action, or if this happens, do this, is really important. So being able to define it, and even in being able to give like a very solid example of a condition, like, oh, if I draw a red card, then I get a point. So being able to articulate or some way articulate that definition in their own words is really important. So I think definitely trying to see if they learned or if they didn't learn. The group that we were with, they were doing a lot. They were saying, oh, it's a consequence you have. And I realize now I might have phrased it as a consequence, but rather my phrasing as like it should be like an action rather than just a consequence. So it's the use of certain words can ground it in a different perspective. So a lot of them were giving examples of like, oh, well, I messed up, so then this happened, I had to throw this away. And like, yeah, that is sort of a conditional. That's something like, oh, if this happens, do this. Like if you mess up, then you need to start over. But it wasn't necessarily the thing that was looking for. They were relating conditionals to a lot of negative consequences rather than like a conditional can be a positive thing. It's just something that happens. So the advice I would give teachers teaching this concept for the first time is kind of one, read up on what if and else statements are. It can be very confusing at the start, but in reality, conditionals are used a lot in the world, and we kind of just do them automatically. We automatically know that if the door is closed, I'm going to open the door. So more read up on it for a little bit, like what is an if and else statement, watch a few videos on it, but then really try to think, kind of write down in your life when you would actually see conditionals actually happening in your life and be able to provide really straightforward real world examples for it, either being it in your daily routine, either being something with a game that you might have played, either being maybe like when your job, like what would be some conditionals in your job or in your classroom. So I think those are really important to be able to ground those in the real world, and then being able to relate those to the students that are like, here's the key action item that made me change and do these things, or this was the conditional statement that changed this event. So moving on from conditionals going into more technology examples, it's going to be a lot of game development. So being able to see when you would get points in a game in a coding environment is when you'll see them a lot happening. So for example, on the Kano, we have a game called Make Pong. So you can have triggered events that happen in Make Pong, like if the ball hits your opponent's paddle, then it's going to grow maybe by 2 sizes. So that's a clear, like the event, when it hits the paddle, then it's going to do this. Else it's going to stay the normal size it is. So probably playing in games where they can modify the games and kind of see the different conditions that they can do immediately and see how they'll affect the play of the game is going to be really exciting for them to see, because when they can modify the games themselves, that's when they really like it.